I'd like to call the August 8th Governing Board meeting to order, being held here at Jerry Rovey District Facility. Time is 5:31. Governing Board members present: Brian Parks, Paul Bixler, Paul Jensen, Michael Todd, myself, Mark Aguirre. Mr. Parks, if you could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is recommended the Governing Board approve the regular agenda form consistent with Board Policy BEDB and temporarily suspend Governing Board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda form consistent with Board Policy BEDB and temporarily suspend Governing Board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously. Enrollment and staffing report. Dr. Schuff.
President Aguirre, members of the Governing Board, we're pleased to start off with a great start to the school year. Our enrollment is up. You can see the numbers as posted there in the executive summary. Will continue to watch that enrollment and with the registrations. Today is day 4. What will happen is after the end of 10 days, if there are any students that have not been here for 10 days and not here one of those days, then we are required to withdraw those students. And that's at the time when we will really have a much better idea what our actual enrollment is. So the enrollment is higher than where we ended with. It's pretty much on track for where we would expect to be, getting closer to where we would expect to be by the 40th day. So all of that's very important that we are monitoring that for a couple of reasons, certainly for staffing and also for budget purposes. So I just want, first up, before we go on to some other information from Mr. Nuttall on vacancies, any other questions about enrollment? Okay, without any, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's great. I think the word's out. Parents want to send their kids to Liberty. So.
Well, we are packing them in, particularly at Blue Horizons. We built that school for 900, and we're about right there within one short year's time. Also, just having a conversation with Mrs. Camp today. She's spoken to at least 3 different parents in the last couple of days that have not had their children enrolled in school at all last year. So I think that's something else that we'll be, contending with as well, is on the roll, but also we're still getting kids coming back to school for the first time. Mr. Nuttall, anything you would like to add on vacancies and staffing?
I do not. Dr. Schuff, I do have a quick question. I know that we looked at a percentage of growth for our budgeting purposes. Are we within that, or have we exceeded that, at least at this moment, that projected growth? We
have not yet reached that. And again, that's where we'd expect to be by the 40th day, and then still looking to that by the 100th day. So we expect to still be growing, but I would say we are definitely on track for that.
Great.
Any other questions? Nope. Hearing none. Item 2.2, override facts. Ms. Basinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Governing Board. The purpose of this presentation is to provide information regarding the district's maintenance and operation override. At the May 23rd governing board meeting, the governing board unanimously approved calling for a maintenance and operations override election on November 8, 2022. The proposed maintenance and operations override allows or authorizes the district to spend above the state limit through local voter support by an additional 10% to provide funds for programs and services above those funded by the state. The district has an existing override that was authorized in November of 2016. With passage of the November 22 election, the override will generate approximately $3 million for the 2023-2024 school year. The override is supported by property tax that is levied on the total assessed valuation of businesses, homes, and all other property of the district. Overrides typically last for 7 years. For the first 5 years, they're funded at the full 10%, which is the equivalent of ours, up to 15%. The 6th year at 2/3 of the funding, and the final 1/3 in the last year. It's common for districts to go back to voters prior to the override phasing down in order to avoid loss of revenues. What we are asking for on the November 2022 is a renewal of the existing override, and with that continued funding, the district will be able to continue to provide a level of education, services, and programs for students not funded by the state. Listed here are the purposes for which the override will be used for. It's retention and recruitment of quality teachers and staff, sports and extracurricular activities, music, art, and physical education programs, reduce class sizes, and full-day kindergarten. The district has had a maintenance and override in place since 1983, which is pretty amazing considering the amount of time since then, being that it's 2022. If the voters choose not to renew the override, the district would not have the funding to provide those educational services and programs that were listed previously. Because we are in year 6 of the current override, the override has begun to phase down. If the November 22nd or November 2022 election is not successful, the district will have to reduce its budget by an additional $1 million per year over the next 2 years. And the overall loss to the district is over $3 million per year after that. The estimated tax rate needed to fund the full override is 79 cents per $100 of net assessed valuation, and the cost to the average homeowner in the district is $147 per year, or $12.25 per month. We provided an estimate for a home with an assessed valuation of $100,000 to use as an example. So if you know what your assessed valuation is or was this past year, and let's say you knew your assessed valuation was $200,000, you can multiply that $79 times 2 to get an idea of what you would be paying for your property. Arizona law requires the district to list what the override will be spent on in the voter information pamphlet. Additionally, the district reports annually on how the monies were spent for the preceding year. And again, all of these programs were impacted by the current override reduction because we are in that first year of phase down, and they will continue to be impacted with the further reductions of the override. This slide displays the risk at the school level. The first phase down resulted in a reduction of teaching positions, increased class sizes, reduction of instructional minutes for special area classes, and also a reduction to our extracurricular activities. At risk is an additional 29 positions if the reductions continue. So how will the district manage continued reduction of override funds and trying to look at what would happen? When looking at the possible budget reductions for the phase down, and elimination of the override, it's important to understand that the district budgets the highest amount of our budget to the classroom. The lowest amounts are in other areas of the budget. This is evidenced in the snippet of the Auditor General report, or Auditor General spending report, displayed here on the right-hand side of the screen. Our other operational areas are very low and low compared to our other peer school districts. It will be very difficult to make any reductions to those other operational areas outside of instruction. The next several slides provide some examples of what further override reductions could look like. They're just examples. They're not what it will look like. Option 1, as displayed here, is to essentially reduce everything currently funded with the override. You can see the actions on the left-hand side and the impacts along the right-hand side. Option 2 leaves some special area positions, but reductions in other areas. And again, you can see the impacts on the right-hand side. Option 3 is to maintain the current funded specials position, but again, make reductions in other areas. And again, the impacts are listed on the right. And from my heart, none of these are best for our students or our district. And they are just examples of what could happen if the override phases down. Listed here is the election timeline. It is the last day for voter registration is Monday, October 10, 2022. Early voting will start Wednesday, October 12th, 2022, and the override election will be held on Tuesday, November 8, 2022. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Brian? Paul?
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to congratulate the administration on making this year less painful than it could have been. My anticipation of this school year was far different than what we are seeing at this moment, and I think that goes a lot towards the administration to make it quite a bit more comfortable than it very well could have been had things worked out differently. And certainly our growth has helped that. There's no question about it. But congratulations, administration. That was great. I'm worried that 23-24 could be a lot more painful. And so I just want everybody to keep in mind that, yeah, it doesn't hurt too bad right now. But if that override does not pass, it will.
Mr. Jensen? Mr. Todd?
I have no questions.
Can you go back a couple slides so that we could see employees who would, I
I'm sorry,
believe it was,
am I going too far?
was it this, was it
Was it that one?
this one, I believe. So right there, that's saying if we are unable to renew, 29 individuals will lose employment, potentially.
29 positions.
And I'll sound like a broken record probably for the next however many more weeks it is that I stand in support of the renewal. The facts are right here. Contrary to what we might hear, on average, $12.25 a month. To continue the learning environment that our children are currently experiencing, to maintain keeping individuals employed, not only keeping them employed, but also providing for their families, which also, by the way, helps the economy in our community. So I hope that everyone can understand that when these tough decisions come of do we continue to provide a positive learning environment for our children, that I think for me as a board member that I'm okay with taking money out of my pocket. I'm okay with maybe I don't get a coffee that morning for the week. I'll be okay with that. I'll survive. So thank you, Ms. Basinger. Is there any other questions before we move forward? Anything else that any other board members would like to say? Okay. Item 2.3, impacts of ESA vouchers. Ms. Basinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the governing board. The purpose of this presentation is to provide information on the ESA vouchers and the impacts of new legislation. And unfortunately, it is too early to provide impacts to the Liberty District. However, the next few slides provide some general information regarding the ESA vouchers. So actually in 1998, the Arizona legislature created the first category of what would be considered a voucher for students to attend private schools. Since then, there have been several successful expansions and more recently several unsuccessful expansions. In general, an ESA is an account administered by ADE. It's funded by state tax dollars to provide options for education of qualified students in Arizona. An ESA is an account that is administered by the Arizona Department of Education. Again, it is funded by state tax dollars to provide those options. The ESA program allows parents of qualified students to utilize those public monies to purchase educational services from private schools, education providers, and/or vendors to fund their child's education. And at least a portion of the funds must be used to provide an education in several basic core areas. And only Arizona residents are eligible for this. House Bill 2853 was passed by legislature and signed by the governor, and it expands the ESA voucher program to all students grade K through 12. And it also expanded the allowable uses for the ESA funds. It's scheduled to go in effect on September 24, 2022. Essentially, the funding enables parents to take public money now sent to K-12 schools and use it to pay for their children's private school tuition or other education costs. And parents are eligible for up to $7,000 per year. Disabled students can receive up to $40,000 for specialized therapy. The state aid equivalent for K-8 public schools is roughly $5,277. That's our M&O and unrestricted capital. The state general fund makes up the difference to get to that $7,000. When it was voted down by the voters in 2018, I believe, the state was funding around $1,080 out of the general fund to pay for these additional vouchers. However, with the newest increase in the state budget increases, they've expanded that difference of what the state will have to fund toward those. The legislation estimated that 60,000 private school students and about 38,000 homeschooled students would immediately be eligible. However, it's important to note that 1.1 million students who currently attend traditional public schools and charter schools will also qualify with the new changes. There is currently a petition drive to refer the House bill to the voters. There is a need for 118,823 valid signatures to be collected before September 24th. Implementation of House Bill 2853 would be put on hold until the November 24th, 2024 election if those valid signatures are collected. At the November 2024 election, voters would decide if the expansion would move forward. either way, if it moves forward or not, currently, it does not impact the students that are currently eligible, so outside of the expansion. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's very early for us to know how the expansion will affect Liberty. So we'll have to monitor our enrollment to see if there are increases or decreases related to this, and look at the factors that would impact the district.
Brian? Questions? Paul?
Just a couple of clarification questions, Ms. Bessinger, if you don't mind. As far as, and I do understand the ESA accounts and how they came into creation. It made a lot of sense at that point. There were students that with disabilities who were not able to get the services they needed from school districts that simply were not in a position to accommodate that. And so the legislature provided additional funds to help offset the cost of these exceptional students. So I understand the beginning of it. This expansion seems to be different than that to me. Can you tell me, we don't know the full impact yet because we don't know how many people are going to apply for it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as far as people who do receive the funds, I understand there are some legislative things in place that talk about what has to be done, some core area instruction and so on. But really, is there any accountability to how this is spent? A homeschool child that perhaps the parents spend on something other? Is there accountability?
Well, I think with the new legislation, there's greater flexibility in how you do spend the money. They do still have to submit reimbursement reports to ADE in order to receive those monies, but I don't know to what level those reimbursement reports, I don't know what detail is required on those reimbursement sheets. I would say to your first part of your comment there is that I think the legislature's intent with this expansion is to provide options for families for underperforming schools. The problem is that most of those families can't afford private school in the first place, so
yeah, and transportation is not part of this. I mean, you could spend it on transportation, but there's really not an accounting for the transportation that if you decide to go to a different school that you would have to incur. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that, if they refund for transportation or not. I apologize, I don't know that answer. I was looking to see that they had a listing, I thought, of some of the things, but
yeah, I didn't see it in the legislation, so I just made that leap of faith.
I think it's allowable spending as private school tuitions, textbooks and curriculum, tutoring, achievement tests, uniforms, college entrance exams, approved individual classes and extracurricular activities at a public school, tuition fees required for textbooks, and then again, the students with disabilities would have additional opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes, it says that disabled students get up to 40,000. How much would we get for a comparable student at like a public institution? Is it?
My answer wants to be a lot less, but I know that's not what you're looking for. To be honest, I don't have that number just right in my head, but we do receive an additional Group B weight for students that are special ed. I can tell you our budget from this past year, we actually spent over on our special ed student population by roughly between $300,000 and $400,000. So if you kind of put that into perspective of what funding we do receive for the actual costs, it's very expensive for those additional services.
Okay. And then also, is there a possibility or loophole closed that would allow or not allow a public school or charter school to open a private school and then get the additional 7,000 versus the lower amount?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that
if it's allowable, we can run a public-private school and get more money.
Oh, I think we tried that with district-sponsored charter.
I do. And I'm more concerned about chartered schools finding that, and then...
There is a lot of concern from what I read about how the program could be abused by people not necessarily providing quality education for these families that are out there looking and using that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Todd?
Just a couple questions. I appreciate the fact we just don't know exactly the impacts yet, but I would ask that we track this very closely. And maybe in a board report or something, each month we track how many are coming into the district or how many are leaving as a result of this. I feel like this could be years ago all the TV stations changed networks and one day ABC was somewhere else. I feel like we're going to have kids coming and going for a little bit, but it would be interesting to know what those impacts are and if it starts slow and gets bigger or if it happens all at one time. So I would just ask that staff keep us in the loop on that. I'm concerned about this because of so many loopholes that are in the program, and I feel like a lot of kids could be left out. There's a lot of things out there that don't, when you dive deep into this, look very good for education. So I'll leave it at that for now. I guess we'll watch what happens as it moves forward.
I think the consensus that I have seen from other school business officials is that it will be very hard to track the impacts because we have certain absence or withdrawal reasons that we are required to put into our student data system. And so like we can see if students withdraw to go to homeschooling, but I don't know that there is an option to say we're withdrawing to collect an ESA voucher. So we'll have to depend on a certain amount of state reporting to be able to provide that as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Bixler?
Just one final question. In my past, I recall that homeschool was essentially supervised by the county superintendent. Is that still true?
Yeah.
And in the past, there was not a lot of oversight that the county superintendent had on homeschool. Has that changed at all?
I probably would not know the answer.
Just briefly, they are noted or recorded as officially being homeschooling, but that's about the extent of the oversight.
Thank you.
So I think to Mr. Jensen's point, I think the point he was trying to make is obviously we don't have the concrete numbers, but that public schools continue to educate and will continue to be there for those students, even as it costs the district additional monies. And I think that's what the point Mr. Jensen was making. The other question, the one question that I did have when it does come to these vouchers, and I think it's been stated a little bit obviously, but what would be some of the oversights that public schools have to adhere to but those voucher schools, if you will, would not have to adhere to as far as charters, right? So I'm assuming there's some financial things that we have to adhere to that they do not?
I think public schools definitely are held to a higher accountability. Charter schools, they're doing more and more to hold them accountable, but still not to the level that public schools are. As far as these, the ESA, the private schools, I don't know of any oversight other than that would be similar to the charter school oversight. So,
so realistically, taxpayer money is being used, but one could actually argue that with these vouchers, that it's not even actually being watched. It's just, hey, here's some good money, go do your thing.
yeah, I think that the AD has the oversight of that, and so one would hope that they would be providing that oversight of how.
As long as they're funded properly to be able to provide that oversight, correct? Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Basinger.
You're welcome.
Item 3.1. I'm sorry. Did anyone have anything else before we move forward? Okay. Item 3.1, governing board updates. Anyone have anything? Right?
I really enjoyed the back to school kickoff. I think Dr. Shuff did an excellent job putting that together and great speaking there. It was nice to see my kids homeschool get the big award, but anyway, great job. I really enjoyed watching the kids there too. There was an amazing performance. Of course, back to teacher night was wonderful to see the school kids and the teachers again. It was looked pretty seamless this year, and it looked actually Miss Boris made it look relatively easy. So anyway, thanks to everybody.
Ms. Bixler?
Yes, I also want to congratulate the administration on the convocation that we had at the start of the school year. It was wonderful. We don't often, we seem like we're so busy putting out fires all the time that we never really take the opportunity to sit and congratulate ourselves on the successes that we had. And that day we got to really celebrate. And we've had lots of successes. So it was a really good time to be there. I also really enjoyed the reprise of the Mary Poppins with the original cast members. It was wonderful. So, and they did really, really well considering how probably little practice they had. They pulled together and got out there and did a great job. So very well done convocation.
Mr. Jensen?
Just echo how great it was to get all together and see everybody, and excited to celebrate the opening of the school.
Mr. Todd?
Mr. Chairman, again, I echo the sentiments of what my fellow board members said about the back-to-school kickoff. Some great awards were given out, all basically related to academic achievements. So we saw some great numbers. I also just received several phone calls from parents at Liberty concerned about the HVAC system. Dr. Schuff did take me over there, I think on day 2. It is certainly very humid in that building and very hot. I am concerned. We had this concern last year. We were promised that things were going to be fixed by the developers, and that has not happened. So I think as a board, we need to pay very close attention to this. We must make sure the education environment for our students is the best, and it is anything but that with the high humidity. And it's not like that in this building. It's not like that in any of the other buildings. But at our campus here at Liberty, it's definitely rough, and we have to make this a very high priority to get fixed, and the developers need to come back and get this right. Along with that, I'm also just driving through here today looking at the field over here, and I'm not sure it looks better than it did before they redid it. So I'm concerned about that as well.
Item 4.1, calls to the public. Chris Kenyon. So as you come up, you'll see that there's a timer. You each get 3 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon or evening, whatever we want to call it. Tonight, I just really want to take just a few minutes. I know last governing board session, you guys had stated that at the end, one of the future topics is going to be campus security. I would really, really appreciate it if you guys would look into providing school resource officers for each campus. I know that's something that the state had passed, and they, to my understanding, will be funding that for us, so that wouldn't come out of our budget. I know there's some competition there with the counseling, but the physical safety of our kids is so important to me, to the parents, to the staff, to everybody, I would assume. So I would just really, really ask that the board and administration really consider that. I know there's a lot of other schools and other districts that every school either has their own resource officer or they share resource officers, but there's somebody nearby. We live in crazy times. We can't stop crazy people. Yes, we have nice gates and we have nice locked doors, but a crazy person can get in. If they want to, they can get in. So you can't stop this maniacs from getting in and starting something, but if you have something there to respond right away, it can end pretty quick without so much damage, right? So I really ask that the board consider that, take the time, digest that, look into the laws and see what we have available to us. It's super critical, and that's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Elwood Kunstler.
Good evening, Superintendent Schuff, President Aguirre, board members, and the Liberty Legal team watching online. Good evening. We approach you all yet again with the approval and consent of we the parents, we the people, we the grandparents, and we the taxpayers. Organizations like Purple for Parents, Arizona Protect the Children, and many more, as you will soon find out, We ask again for the resignation of Paul Bixler. We understand that Paul must resign. He cannot be fired, but he can be recalled. Please understand, this is not, I repeat, this is not a political agenda. This is solely about our children. This is about the right of the parents to not have Paul Bixler walk into a classroom of 2-year-olds, okay? They deserve that right. Also, please understand that what will happen is a direct result of Superintendent Schuff, President Mark Aguirre, and board members who do not support these parents. We ask for the protection of our children. We have more support than you could possibly understand. Paul Bixler is free to live a life that is chosen, but not at the cost of the mental stability of our children. So we ask Paul once again, for the sake of the children and everything else involved, please resign. Thank you.
Joe Hengemuller?
President Aguirre, Governing Board, Dr. Schuff. My name is Joe Hengemuller, and I am a resident of this school district. I'm here tonight to show support for board member Ms. Paul Bixler, who as recently as a few moments ago, has been the subject of undue and unfair criticism, as well as the threat of punitive action by some members of this community. Not for something that she has said or done as a member of this board, rather for expressing her informed opinion as a private citizen. Like it or not, and even if it makes us uncomfortable, we are all entitled to freedom of thought without fear of retribution. One may challenge or question another's opinion. It happens all the time. I think we can agree that the world would be pretty bland if we all thought the same thing, believed the same thing, and said the same thing. But elevating one's disagreement with another person's feeling or opinion to a level of intimidation and the ultimatum of threatening to mobilize to thwart a budget override election amounts to something very rich in irony in a school district. It's called bullying. If someone brings an issue forward for discussion in this chamber and does so in her or his official capacity as a board member, the first obligation is to listen to that person's input and perspective and respectfully appreciate that a diversity of opinion exists. Ms. Bixler, indeed, every board member should be evaluated on what she or he has done or not done for the growth, the advancement, and the well-being of this district and its students, all of its students. And yes, that can mean sharing an opinion that not everyone agrees with, but isn't that why there's a board in the first place? Aren't all ideas, opinions, and recommendations discussed by board members during an official meeting settled and decided by a vote after a discussion of the merits? To date, board member Bixler has not introduced any proposed changes similar to private citizen Bixler's comments before that legislative body several months ago. I didn't realize torches and pitchforks were still readily available. Alas, here we are. To those of you who are wielding them, if not literally, then at least figuratively, I hope you saved the receipts. Return them, and then return from being irrational to being reasonable. When you do, you'll be setting a better example for our students who deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any board members have any comment? Hearing none. Moving on to item 5, consent agenda. Does anyone have anything that they would like pulled?
Administration would like to pull the personnel report.
So item 5.8. Anyone else? Hearing none? I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 5.8.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 5.8.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously. We'll just get right into item 5.8. Administration.
Mr. Guire, members of the board, in the interest of getting as much staff hired as possible with our growth and remaining vacancies, Mr. Nuttall has an additional staff to recommend with the overall personnel action report.
Mr. President, members of the board, in addition to what is already prescribed on the personnel action report, I'd like to recommend the approval of Sheila DiBattista, a kindergarten teacher at Liberty Elementary School, effective on 8/9. In addition to that, Miss Elizabeth Walters, certified teacher for kindergarten at Blue Horizons Elementary, with a start date of 8/11. They also are eligible for the 2% previously governing board approved teacher stipends of $866 and $753 respectively. So those are additions to the personnel report that we're requesting approval for this evening.
Questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 5.8.
I'd make a motion to approve item 5.8 with the additional 2 teachers as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously. And if the board doesn't have a problem with this, I just would accept a nod of the head if you would. I'd like to move item 6.4 all the way to the top, if we could, so that we have an individual who can get home to his family and get some sleep.
Agree.
Agree.
Okay. Item 6.4, discussion and consideration to approve revised placement on exempt support staff salary schedule and compensation for maintenance supervisor.
Governing board members, Mr. President, as we've documented over and over, we've increased just about 25% in the last 4 years. As a result, we've talked quite extensively about the additional scope of work our maintenance supervisor is required to pay particular attention to. Square footage of facilities for Blue Horizons is one. That's a primary thing, and just wanted to provide a recommendation. I've conducted some comparisons in terms of competitive salary. Not only does this help bring us into a competitive nature, but it helps us in retention. And we do a lot of other work as a district to put things towards retention. And so the recommendation I'm making this evening is to move that position from band 3 of the exempt support staff salary schedule to band 5, which would be about a budget impact of $12,000 and some change, which includes benefits over the course of this year. So that proposed change I've included in the exempt support staff salary schedule, as you can see the revision date upon your approval.
Questions? Mr. Jensen?
What other things are we doing to help alleviate the struggle of that maintenance department to help cover this increase?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As you're aware, we've approved 4 grounds positions. We've just simply not been able to hire for the grounds positions. We've had the grounds positions posted for 4 months. We've tried every single possible avenue. We've reached out to people who've applied for other jobs within the district and say, hey, can you help us for a little bit of time? As a result, what we are really required to do at this point in time is to outsource our services because the grass isn't going to stop growing because our mowers are sitting in the unattended. That's an example. In addition, some of the services in grounds that are one-offs, tree trimming, hedge trimming of the shrubs that don't occur regularly when we have 2 grounds people. They just can't simply get to all of that work. We also have additional duties and responsibilities that are over and above the maintenance responsibilities. So we assist all of our school sites in setting up things, tearing down things, moving things from campus to campus using our warehouse. So all of our folks help to do all of those items. Earlier in the summer, on July 1st, the governing board did approve some specialized maintenance folks. One of our grounds people is qualified to do that. We held off because I didn't have anybody else to do the grounds. So really what I'm getting at is we've had to really work to patch it together. The final thing is, a maintenance supervisor really is intended to lead the maintenance and grounds of the district and oversee that and provide us with recommendations for improving our practice and our service to the campuses. He's out in the field for 12 hours a day because he's doing all of the additional work that we otherwise have not been able to staff for. And so we want him to be able to do his job so we can determine if we are really working effectively and efficiently in our maintenance and operations component of the district.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Michael, did you have anything?
No, I'm very supportive of this. I've seen the work that, just call him out, Kevin's done. Kevin, thank you for your dedication here to the district. Even at the kickoff this year, we were focusing on some great work that the maintenance department had done, improving turnaround times on maintenance tickets, and Kevin wasn't able to be there to take those accolades because he was too busy working. So I'm supportive of this raise. My question, Mr. Nuttall, is you talk a little bit about not finding maintenance folks, and they're doing a lot of other work as well. Have we thought about changing this temporarily, at least, and looking for some warehouse workers who might be able to handle everything but the maintenance? That I know our maintenance guys are helping set up stages, tables, chairs, move stuff around in the cafeteria, a myriad. Have we looked at refocusing maybe what we're going to hire for in the time to take that load off of them?
Sure. We just were fully staffed in our warehouse and our courier positions. We had a resignation earlier in the summer, and we're just able to get that hired last board meeting. What I will say about that warehouse is that it ebbs and flows. So, you have at the very beginning of school, we adjust and accommodate for furniture needs and movement of items that teachers need in particular. That somewhat wears down over time, and then it's the management of our assets and how we're incoming the assets with our warehouse supervisor, and the courier position is that. So I think that ebbs and flows in terms of putting a lot of focus and resource there. What I would like to recommend is that we have some consideration to catch up with some grounds work that we just simply can't get to yet, and catch up, and then utilize the outsourced services to maintain some of those pieces. In talking with Kevin, he feels as if when he gets fully staffed in the maintenance side, which he will be, which he is as of tonight from the personnel report, he believes that the maintenance will be able to catch up. There are certain things like school facilities board, things that are bigger projects, and 4 air conditioning units, as an example, on Las Brisas getting struck by lightning. That's not something our general maintenance person can just go and revamp. So we have some outside contractors that provide those services for us, and we utilize the trust and we utilize SFB for many of those pieces.
Thank you. I certainly think they're doing a great job, and I think at this point we have 2 choices. And it's not that we've been pushed into this corner by the employee, but it's just facts. We look at paying this person an adequate salary, or we lose him and we hire somebody else for even more money. So I think he's honestly underpaid still. So with this raise, so I'm all for this.
And with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 6.4.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve item 6.4, the revised placement on exempt support staff salary schedule and compensation for maintenance supervisor from band 3 to band 5.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Enthusiastically, aye. Enthusiastically, aye.
Michael?
I would agree
I am
as well.
also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously. Item 6.1, discussion and consideration to approve Elizabeth Strickler as the Executive Director of Business Services.
Mr. President, members of the board, tonight we're recommending the approval of Elizabeth Strickler, who is here tonight. We're excited to have her with us this evening for the Executive Director of Business Services position. Ms. Strickler understands, I think on all scales, the shoes that she has to fill, Ms. Basinger, and we've found 6 other jobs for Ms. Basinger to do. She doesn't know it yet, but we are recommending tonight Ms. Strickler for the Executive Director of Business Services. She has extensive experience in payroll, business management, and even human resources, which is awesome as a partner there. And so we're excited about her experiences. She comes to us from Isaac School District as the executive. Wilson. I read her resume. I promise I did. She comes to us with 2 years of experience as a director of business services there. So we're happy to steal somebody else.
Questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 6.1.
I'll make a motion to approve item 6.1, the hire of Elizabeth Strickler as the Executive Director of Business Services.
I will second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously.
Up for it.
Item 6.2, approval of second reading of board policy JFB. Dr. Schuff.
President Aguirre, members of the governing board, there are some adjustments coming back from our legal team, really that are more specifics than they are actual content. Again, JFB, the reason for the changes is statute changes related to open enrollment. And if I was just to say in a nutshell, the intent of the statute change is that we would treat our open enrollment students as if they were our own going forward and reserve capacity to the extent we're able to, which philosophically aligns with administration and our ongoing board members' vision for that as well. So this isn't a hard change for us to make, and we then there's some other specifics of things like calling things the district and pupils and that sort of thing throughout. But other than that, really not any significant substantive changes from the first reading to the second reading for your approval tonight.
Questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 6.2.
Mr. President, I move that we approve item 6.2, the second reading of the board policy JFB.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye. Show that it approved unanimously. Item 6.3, approval of memorandum of understanding between Liberty Elementary School District and Read Better, Be Better.
President Aguirre, members of the board, this is essentially a grant opportunity for a project that is intended to increase the literacy of our students, partnering our older students with our younger students to help them with the reading skills. And we started out with a pilot, and now we are extending that to other schools.
Questions?
Yeah, Dr. Seth, you just answered one of my questions. I was wondering if this was something that is continuing, and we had a pilot of it to begin with, and now it's continuing from there as the recommendation from the administration. As far as the 8th grade reader leaders, is there a process for selection on that?
I'll defer that to Mrs. Camp.
There is. And we look to the leaders that are not already stepping up as school leaders. So students that are already in NJHS or SUGO or things like that, we're looking for the hidden leaders in the classroom to give them another opportunity to be leaders with early readers.
It's a terrific program. I love the idea. Eighth graders going and reading with second graders. What a good idea. So, yeah, I'm in support. There was one thing that I saw within the agreement that I didn't quite understand. It says, participating schools are asked to make a meaningful contribution as per available funds. What does that mean? A significant contribution. Is there any guideline on what that means?
There is. So they gave us a range of what a meaningful contribution would be, and we took the low end of the range for our contribution with ESSER monies.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. I'm just curious, some of the red lines, where did those come from? Were those our lawyer that did that, or was that somebody else? Particularly on page 2, number 9, it says RBBB agrees to destroy any and all student data provided by the district no later than June 30th, 2024. RBBB shall confirm destruction of the student data upon request of the district. And that was dropped out, so I'm just curious. That was red, so just curious where that came from.
That did come from our attorney.
Okay. Is there a reason that we wouldn't want that data destroyed?
We satisfied the requirements for the law and how we could still participate with this organization for them to be able to collect data in the research study that they are doing. So we were able to comply with what is required for that with an adjustment to the agreement.
Okay, I guess I'm not clear at this point. What is the research that they're trying to gather? Do we know?
So they're looking to gather data on the effectiveness of the program, and so they ask that we share data with them so that they can see the difference that this program might make with the intended targeted students.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no other questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 6.3.
Mr. President, I move that we approve item 6.3, Memorandum of Understanding between Liberty Elementary School District and the Read Better, Be Better program.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Brian?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I am also an aye, show that it approved unanimously. Item 6.5, discussion of school year 2022 stakeholder survey information.
President Aguirre, members of the governing board, we have shared this particular slide deck and survey results with the governing board as we were beginning to look at our strategic plan, noting from the feedback we received from our constituents about what kinds of things that we could do better in the upcoming year. So I would tell you that administratively, we've really looked at it certainly with a higher lens of focus on those things for which we could do better. In this stakeholder feedback, you can see some start items where it has some highlights of things that are stronger. But overall, we took the information from parents. What did we learn from parents? What did we learn from our school staffs? And then certainly our district office and administrative team, what do we learn from them as well? Certainly one thing that we'd like to do better in terms of just surveys overall together is what can we do to continue to increase the number of participants on the surveys, because the more people we get involved, that's going to give us even better and more useful and reliable data. So I would really just offer the board is your interest in talking this through. Would you like for me to make some comments of seeing some highlights I saw that I put together in the slides? Would you rather speak to some of the things that you may have noticed and had questions about in the actual survey data? So I can approach this a couple of different ways, but I just want to make sure I'm letting you have the conversation that you were hoping to have today.
Preferences?
I wouldn't mind going through Dr. Suff's thoughts on what the survey says, but I do have a question when that's done.
Okay.
And just to add on that, is there anything that you see in here that's going to reflect changes in how you're moving, how the district's moving?
Sure, I can speak to it on a high level. The big ideas I think that came out of both staff and parents were certainly the behaviors of children coming back from the pandemic. Just like I spoke to today, you know, we've got children coming to us that haven't been in school at all for a year. So those were elevated. There are things that schools across the state and the nation are seeing. You know, anytime I read something about superintendents, what are we seeing? Retention and recruitment are issues, and behaviors are issues. So that was one of the things that we elevated with our administrative team, both at the school level and the district level. So at each of the schools, each schools with a group of stakeholders are putting together some recommendations for improvements at the school level to their school systems. What will bubble up from that are some things that maybe the district system has to improve as a result of that. So the schools are working on their plans here in August. At the district level, we'll be bringing people together in September to say what else needs to be adjusted or changed. Also putting in, and this is really more of a continuation, there's success teams at each of the local schools where they are reviewing their own discipline and referral data early and more often to see if they can identify students who need a tier 2 or tier 3 type of intervention support. So I would just say, you know, taking some of our behavior systems and discipline system, taking that up a notch and seeing really how we can target the support for our children. Additionally, this year we hired a behavior specialist. So each school will have a referral process for those students that they think qualify and really have the need for that tier 3 support. So, you know, that may just be a couple of students at each school, and then the behavior interventionist will work directly with them and the teams and teachers for how to provide that support to kids. So I'd say behavior and discipline was really a big one. Another one I say came out in, I think there's some slides in here that speak to people feel like they have the resources, supports, guidance they need to do their jobs effectively. And I think that's something worth unpacking because there's 3 things built into that question. And so that's something we'll be meeting with our principals about, our own district office staff about, so that each department lead and each school principal can just utilize their own staff as a focus group to better understand what is it they need in terms of support, what is it they need in terms of guidance, what is it they need in terms of resources that would help people to be able to do their jobs more effectively and less stressfully. So I think if we can understand what that is, then we can put some plans into place to better address that, and it might be different from campus to campus or department to department. A third area, an example would be with in the area of professional development. A couple of years back, we were very isolated in our approach to professional development. So one of the things that we did is we provided more district-wide staff development that allowed, say, for example, all of our 3rd grade teachers to know who one another were, to get training and support together, and that collaboration extended beyond the school. So that was a big plus. A couple years later, enter into coming back from pandemic, and the teachers hadn't even seen one another in their own campus, let alone district-wide, and they were hungrier for more opportunities at the school level because that contributes not only to their professional learning, but also to their overall school culture and support for one another. So we heard that feedback, particularly in the comments that, so we made a change for this year to change the balance to less district office, district, cross-district, and more school. So those are some examples of some, big pieces. Certainly anything related to morale that contributes to retention. So those are some of the things that we're evaluating, and we hope to, in September, provide almost like a early survey again with just some selected items around the area of morale, so that we can bring that information back to the governing board at a study session. We're aiming that for the end of September at this time. Did I answer your question, Mr. Parks?
Oh, yeah,
Probably
absolutely.
too extensively, perhaps.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So those are some of the big ideas that we're lifting up of what to do with the data now that we've got it. Ms. Bixler, did that answer your questions, or would you prefer me to still go back into the slide deck?
No, some of what you just said did answer some of the question I had, but I did have a question that, just clarification for me. It appeared to me that within the survey where the staff was talking about their use of unwrapping the standards in ELA and math and using that as part of their planning for lesson planning, it appears to me that the number of times that occurs weekly or more than once a week has gone up. Is that correct? Does it appear that, as far as self-reporting, that our teachers are starting to use the standards more for lesson planning?
Yes, I think the survey shows relatively the same level of how comfortable are you utilizing it. But I think the real highlight, and probably the thing that matters more, is their self-reports on their actual use of that. And that increased by about 10% over the prior year. So that was a pretty big jump up. And to further support that, because we recognize that, you're really looking for everybody to feel comfortable and everybody using it. I think our principals are working even more extensively in their collaborative teams and the grade level teams. And with new teacher orientation, new teacher induction, there was a heavier, at least as much or more so, emphasis on how to utilize those documents, how to use them for planning in those content areas. So we'll stick with that because we have a pretty big group of new folks this year. And
as far as the professional development that will occur during the school year, is it still going to be campus-based, or are we still going to focus mostly on campus as opposed to district?
Yes, so we're about one per month at the district level. Is that about right? And then, I roughly one every other month that the teachers just have for planning purposes for report cards and progress reports, and then approximately 2 per month at the school level. Is that accurate? Okay.
In my personal opinion, I like the direction that's going. The more we use the standards and utilize that tool for the instruction planning, that I think we'll see a lot of benefit. So I think we already have. And I think that continuing that will be a really good idea. We're maintaining the 40 minutes per week where the teachers have autonomy with their collaborative teams at their own grade level. So where they are making those decisions of, do we need to use this time to collaboratively plan together? Do we need to use this time to evaluate how students performed with their data? Are we developing resources to be able to, teach more effectively or plan the interventions for kids? So that autonomy, we still call that part of time professional learning also. So it's not just like a workshop that teachers would attend. Thank you.
There are a few comments about the teachers not liking the math curriculum. Is there any plans, or what's is it a valid concern, or what kind of options do we have about kind of that math curriculum?
So we utilize Eureka, which is very much aligned to the state standards. It is an open source free resource that the district adopted, I would say 2017, 16, maybe it was before we came. The district has a schedule for curriculum revisions and adoptions, as well as, and that correlates with instructional resources and their adoption. It's usually spread out over somewhere between 10 and 12 years. It's pretty spread out, really because of the limited resources the district has to purchase and do, and or the work in developing new curriculum. So this year we're scheduled to work on social studies and science, and then I think before math would come up, it would likely be ELA would be next, if I'm remembering the cycle correctly. If we saw a great number of people saying this isn't aligned, my kids aren't learning with this, some of those issues, that would give us pause to perhaps reconsider that timeline. But due to the expense of money and man hours, it probably needs to wait its turn, and it too would be up for revision. Because all curriculum, all resources come up on a cycle for revision.
Thank you. And then there are a few comments about a lot of testing being done. Can you help me understand kind of what does that testing look like, and can we reduce any of that?
Sure. Throughout the year, it depends. I would look at it from the lens of the student taking the assessment. So when we put together a district-wide assessment schedule, you'll see a lot of assessment on there, but that doesn't necessarily pertain to all students. I would tell you that this question came up by a teacher in our teacher advisory group. So it's I have heard the comment in the question. I would have to clarify, though, that most of the assessments we give are actually required. So the AASA is the state test for 3rd through 8th grade students in the springtime. That's required. Our Acadience testing for kindergarten through 3rd grade students, that is required. English learner assessments, required. Our Gifted is actually a choice for those who opt in, but we also do the blanket testing for all kindergartners, and now the state is providing funding, for all 2nd graders. Parents can opt out of those if they so choose for their children. So that leaves the district assessments. We have a pre-post in the fall and the spring for ELA and math. So a day for ELA, and I say, maybe a morning for ELA, a morning for math in the fall and the spring. And that is related to our Proposition 301 performance plans. So essentially that also is required for our teachers and students because of the Prop 301. If the district chose to change that and teachers approve that change and we brought that to the board, that's a consideration. And so the only thing remaining then would be Benchmark 1 and Benchmark 2, which I would argue are the most valuable assessments because that actually assesses what did our children just learn, how well did they learn, and what should we do about it. It's something we'll continue to study, build understanding for of what things we have choice on, which things we don't. And Mrs. Camp and the Ed Services team are well aware of, we'd rather spend all of our time instructing and learning, right?
I'll just add this past year, some other required assessments that came from the state, field testing. So anytime an assessment is getting ready to change, we are required to take a field test. So last year we were required to take the Azella field test. And then we were also required to take the writing field test. So the children sample those items for the state, and the state determines what items they're going to throw out. They analyze those questions and items, and then they determine what are the new items coming into the new assessment. Those are also required tests that we were chosen to be field tested last year. And then the principal's eyes are probably daggering in the back of my head if they were chosen for NAEP testing. That is the national assessment that is also required if you are chosen for that assessment. So I believe Westar was chosen last year, and they think they're always chosen. Las Brisas was also chosen last year, and that was in grades 4-8. So those also come down the pipe, and we do what we can do to support national and state assessment for field testing.
Thank you. How long are those benchmark 1 and 2? How long do those tests take?
I have someone saying maybe 90 minutes.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
My little one gives the illusion that they last all day too, so just
Yeah, my kids are, oh no, I'm going to test tomorrow. So it is.
And it takes the recess too.
Oh, yes.
And lunch.
It is miserable.
Not,
Mr.
it's
Todd,
not true.
thoughts?
More just some questions. As I looked at some of the results, I guess there's some concerning feedback for me. If you look at the stakeholder feedback on slide 10, I don't feel that that's real good where we're at. Leaders adequately seek parent participation and input when making decisions. Only 39% agreed, 14.99% strongly agreed. Again, when I look at these surveys, I say every time we break this down so much, but I don't want to hang my hat, my legacy, or anything else on slightly agree. So when I look at that, I'm looking for agree and strongly agree. And we're at 54, 55% fit into that category. That's a solid F. I think that administration is going to need to come up with a plan to significantly increase these. And I understand we're coming off of this pandemic, but I've always believed that we're only as good as we are in our darkest hour. And probably the easiest way to talk about that is the good old game of baseball, which Mr. Nuttall will probably maybe appreciate this, maybe not, I don't know. But, home run hitter that hits a home run once in a while is great, but really not the guy you want on your team. Because overall, his on-base percentage is an F. When he gets the perfect pitch, right where he likes it, he hits a home run, great. But the rest of the time, he's not really doing the job. And as I look at these numbers, that's concerning. When I move to slide 11, I see this great big 83%. But again, when I do the math of agree and strongly agree, I see 66 point, maybe call it 67%. That's a D. So again, as I look through these, and then when we get to this 83% number that's on this chart, it's not on that one, but it's on ours. Page 11, maybe it is on. Is 17.3% who slightly agree. And again, slightly agree, as I sit here and I vote to employ somebody, we have motions come before us, I want to be in that agree or strongly agree category. And if it's not, I don't think we've made it. Again, slide 12 is kind of the same way. 66% really turns out to be the number in that strongly agree and agree category. As we go down to the staff survey, number 19, it's just interesting. We used to see that 1 to 3 years be a little bit lower, and more 4 to 7, 8 to 10 was fantastic. And as long as we have Miss Umbra, we'll always have an average of some of this because she's been around longer than anybody, as we learned in the student kickoff. I think she started the 1910 building, and boy, we're thankful for the work she's done for us. But it's just gonna be interesting to see how that plays out over time. I'm not concerned by having so many new teachers. In fact, I think that could be good. Sometimes shaking the tree up a little bit is important. As we move down to slide 19, sorry, that's the same one. Let's go to page number 23. Number 23 has had an impact on learning. Some students, based on recent interactions or your perceptions, to what extent are the following general difficulties impacting your students? Difficulty with social, emotional skills and behaviors. I think that term has been so broadly used, abused, and everything else. I'd like to dig into that more and find out exactly what that means to each teacher, because I would tend to believe if I look across this room, maybe there's 20 people in here and there's probably 50 different opinions of what that topic is these days. So I just think we need to follow back up and say, what do you mean by this exactly? On number 25, This one's kind of concerning. Our environment. Overall, the working environment at my school is positive. Again, 76%, and that's if we drop all the way down to slightly agree. That's horrible. That should be at least 90%. If we're not providing a work environment at school that's positive, we need to stop a lot of what we're doing and reevaluate. And again, administration has to come up with a plan to fix this, and it needs to be fixed. There needs to be a plan by the next board meeting to identify how they're going to raise this number. Because again, if we take out that 18.56% of slightly agree, we're down to a very, very low number of folks who feel, staff who feel the working environment at their school is positive. That does not, pardon the phrase here, but that does not ring the Liberty Bell for the amount of excellence that we want and that we represent. This is going to be very hard to argue to anybody that that's a good number. I think I got a couple more here that were just a little bit concerning. A little bit interesting here, the professional learning developments increase the capacity of my school staff to support diverse student needs. 38.51 agree and 6.8 strongly agree. Again, pretty concerning numbers to me. And then last but not least, on page 31, we've seen a trend here in parent and staff perception decreasing over the last couple of years. And again, I know we have had COVID, and that's brought its challenges, some real, some perceived, and some somewhere in the middle. But again, we're only as good as we are in our darkest hour, and when our kids are out of school and we're facing a pandemic, this is the time we want to shine. We don't want to look at when this was going on and say, well, our healthcare system has done nothing but decline during COVID. We should actually see those numbers going higher as we're a resource. And we've seen some significant drop in the last couple of years, and that has to change. Parents giving school an overall grade of A or B, that's what we should strive for. We talk about how great Liberty District is. That's a solid C, which is not so great. So I think there's a lot of work for this board and for staff to come up with some focus and plans to clean this up, and all these numbers should be above 80% by the end of this year. There's no reason that they shouldn't be. And that's, I believe, exactly what our strategic plan is looking for. That's what our superintendent evaluations are. And it has to change. We have to create an environment for our teachers that is 100%, because they can then pass that down to students and make their success top and not where we're seeing. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
For me, looking at the survey, I've kind of heard it a couple different times over the last year, I guess last year, and it seems like it's still coming up, but the number 22 slide, it has to do with how staff and teachers feel they're being treated by students. I guess I'd wonder if possibly I'd like to hear maybe from the advisory committee if they could expand on that maybe a little bit. I mean, everyone's perception of respect is always going to be a little bit different, but I would be a little bit curious to kind of hear their perspective.
So that is one that we did build into our strategic plan as a key performance indicator. We recognized that it was, higher for how the teachers felt that they're respectful to them, but how respectful were they to other teachers. They felt like that was a lower area. So that is one of the things that the school principals are looking at to say, what are some kinds of things that could improve overall of expectations of how our children behaving in other areas besides just the classroom. So we know that the classroom matters and those behaviors, but we also know what are those behaviors and level of respect in other areas. So in the courtyard, out on the playground, in the cafeteria, in the nurse's office, what do we expect of behaviors? How would we teach for that? And then even with the addition of school IDs, I think that's going to empower a first grade teacher to call a seventh grader by name and say, you know, Mark Aguirre, you know what the expectations are, and have them hop to because there's a name that goes with that. Not trying to pick on you.
I like being called out like that. That happened too often, a long time ago. No, I appreciate that. Thank
So
you. Yeah.
that is absolutely one that I think the board recognized, you know, during our time of the retreat, and also our principals as well.
I guess I'd be curious to know also if we are able to talk to the teacher advisory committee of just that example of implementing the IDs, of that it wasn't obviously just the obvious of security for the students, but also was a tool of for staff and teachers to use also of, we as administration, we heard what you were saying, and you can also use this as a tool if they saw it as that, and if they didn't, that maybe they can be told, hey, you can do this.
It's an
now too.
opportunity.
Right, yeah. It's just another tool in the belt, so. Yep. If there's no other discussion, we can move on to item 7.1, board comments or agenda topic requests.
I have a
Brian?
topic request. The AG opinion just released a opinion on the public comment. I think there's a recommendation to change our policy, but one of the things I wanted to cover was maybe ironing out some rules for the board so everybody knows what's going on.
Okay. I can support that. Ms. Bixler? Mr. Jensen?
I would, as we talk about the emergency plan, if we could consider the SRO and have that included in that review, I think that would be good.
Okay.
And then also at the right time, looking at the maintenance department, help us get a good understanding of where that is. I don't know if it needs to be a board topic or just a board update, but just help us understand and see that hopefully with where we're at, are things getting better?
Mr. Todd?
Just a couple of things. I'd like to get a further update and plan for the HVAC systems at Liberty and also Blue Horizons if they're having any problems. I again like to address the field outside. It's still a little bit light outside. I encourage everybody to drive past that and see if you feel like you got your money's worth. I personally don't. And then I identified several things in the survey that are concerns. I'd like to have staff provide a plan to bring those up, and if they need support from the board, then we can certainly discuss that and provide direction. But we need to have a plan with that now at the beginning of the year, so that this time next year we're not looking at C's, D's, and F's. And I identified all of those top concerns previously.
The only thing that I had is if, in an administrative report, if there's a consensus, if we could possibly have the teacher advisory committee come in. I know we're just getting started, so as far as the beginning of the year, so maybe that could be I don't know, maybe an October-ish or end of September meeting, if they want.
Maybe along with the updated survey might be good timing.
We can, I think our study session and morale might be able to encompass several of these things all at the same time.
And then also, if I could get consensus from the board of, I'd like to have the override as a topic on the agenda from this point until the election, for us as a board to continue to highlight that. Thank you.
We just got to be wary of pro-con statements, but factual information.
I'll follow up.
With that, we've got the upcoming board meetings listed. I believe we had the noted.
Yes, if we could talk about options for this. Essentially, we have an October 15th deadline for the financial report that needs to be submitted, so it needs to have board approval prior to that. There is potential that if the budget documents come out in time, that by the 26th, Ms. Basinger would be able to accomplish that. And if that's the case, then we could stick with our regular scheduled meetings on the 17th and the 31st. Another option could be we hold a special meeting on the 3rd just for the financial documents. Of course, we always throw in a personnel report. And then still hold to the 17th and 31st. I also recognize that you have small children, it's Halloween, and you might prefer to avoid the 31st altogether and do the 24th. So I have a couple of options there. If you'd like to just start by saying I don't want to do it on Halloween and you want to pick the 24th, then perhaps we have the 3rd. But I will also say, to add further complexity, we have scheduled and communicated around our public forums for the 4-day school week on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. And so those have already been advertised and communicated. So the 3rd would make a heavier week for sure. The following week, the 10th, is fall break. So that makes it challenging for, those of you that are trying to get away on the 10th, staff as well, I suppose.
My vote's just to change it to the 3rd and the 24th if I haven't voted it.
3rd and the 24th, you support that? And recognize that we have the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Just take the week off.
Let's just do it all.
Yeah, let's just get it done. It's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Thanks for the feedback on that.
So item 9.1. Entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, I will second.
So we have a motion and a second. All together, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Show that we adjourned at 7:02 unanimously.